Another security feature that I want to share with you is the password hashing, which was introduced again in 5.5, but if you're not on PHP 5.5 yet, bear with me because we have a library for you to retrofit this to earlier versions of PHP, so it's actually available for all versions. When we store passwords, we typically store what's called a hash of a password. So it's a one-way recipe. You start with the password and you generate a hash, which is made up of the password, but you can't get from the hash back to the original password. So you take the password, you hash the password, you store the resulting hash. Next time the user tries to log in again, you take their password, perform the same hashing operation and compare the two results. If they're the same, then it's very likely that the user had the correct password and you can let them in. That's fine, but for too many years we have used a function called MD5, which generates quite a short hash, and it's not very difficult to reverse engineer it. If you're using MD5 passwords and you wonder why that's a problem, then perhaps we should do a little experiment. If I run PHP and I just ask PHP to MD5 a word for me, I'm using a dictionary word, but you'll probably find this works even on try your own password, perhaps for your email or something. So that's the MD5 that we've generated. I've just copied and pasted it there. What happens if I Google for that hash? Oh, well, straight away you can see here that there's what we call rainbow tables. I put that MD5, perhaps I took it from your password database, straight into the web, and it can tell me, oh, here's the reverse engineered version of that string. If you put rainbow in, you would have got that MD5. So that's why plain text to MD5, store the MD5, is not good enough. PHP has lots of ways of doing it better. For a start, we can add a salt, literally sprinkle a little something to make it a little bit more difficult. So what we do with the salt is we take the password and the salt and we MD5 those. So if you want to check if the user has a valid login, then you need to add the salt before you put it through the hash. This also means that you need to store the salt as well as the hash. And for anyone who manages to steal your database from a backup, or I don't know, you leave it on a laptop on a train or something else terrible happens, they have a lot more work to do because they would need to go through and reverse engineer those hashes, brute force all of those values with the various salts. So it becomes much, much more difficult, and that's why the salt is considered to be such a good practice. PHP 5.5 brought in some super simple features which wrap up all of that for you. So there's a function called password hash, and this is how we should generate the hash of a password. The user supplies their password. I have an example here on my slide which has it stored in $pass. You generate the password hash, pass the password. The second argument is a constant. Now you can specify which hash algorithm to use, but PHP has also given us the password underscore default algorithm, which means that whatever the current best practice is for PHP, if it changes in 3 years' time or 5 years' time, PHP will use that. So use the password underscore default constant because it's future-proof. If we echo the output of that, you can see it's a bit more complicated than an MD5. This resulting hash includes information about the salt and about the algorithm that was used to encrypt it. So in the future, if we switch from bcrypt to something more powerful, the password hash and password verify functions will be able to tell which thing they should use when working with this particular password. So that's how you generate the hash. You only need to store the hash, you don't need to store a salt or remember to retrieve it. When you want to know if a user has logged in with the correct password, it looks like this. So you take the existing hash that we generated previously, perhaps when the user registered with the password hash function, and you take the password that the user just submitted through the form and pass the two into password verify. Password first, hash second. All that will do is return true if they do match and false if they don't. So you don't need to repeat the password hash call, get the string, compare the strings, decide what to do. PHP will do all of that for you. It's very, very nicely set up. Now, I mentioned that this was a new feature in PHP 5.5. However, there's a link on screen now to Anthony Ferreira's GitHub account. He built the functionality that went into PHP, that he contributed it to PHP itself. But there's no reason that we shouldn't make the password hash and password verify functionality available to you in userland. So if you are using earlier versions of PHP, then you need to just include the library that you'll find at this URL. And you then either remove it when you upgrade your platform to PHP 5.5 or even wrap it in a function exists call. So if the password hash and password verify functions are already available, you know those came from the PHP language. And if they're not, you're running on an older platform, you need to include this library here. I think as PHP developers, we build the web. Everybody's got a login form, and having a really standard way to just painlessly get this right, I think is really valuable. I think everyone can fit this in their applications, and hopefully with this example, you can include it in yours.